Yay!
Man, he not answering. Yo, let everybody know we started a new live. That live wasn't loading, so I had to start a new one. All
right, say that.
All right. All right, so tell everybody we on now. We live now. All right, one.
Okay.
All right, cool. Princess Simcha, wife of Chief Peniel. Shabbat Shalom. Just give it a minute. Let everybody else who is on the other chat come in before we get started. Just text a few people. Who's governor at? Shabbat Shalom, Chief Abraham. Great teachings today, brother. Princess Simcha, where's your husband? Where's my brother at? Scribe, where you at? Joshua, where you at? Governor, where you at? Shabbat Shalom to the house of Chief Eleazar. Chief men. Teachers. Princess Naomi, Ima. All my brothers and sisters. Shabbat Shalom to everybody in the chat. All right, we're going to set this thing off. Giving all honor and praise to the Most High God, who sitteth in the seat of judgment, whose throne is inestimable, the Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, the high and lofty one who inhabiteth eternity, who has no counselor and none to consort with him. He who has reigned from the beginning, before any creature was formed, or any green shoot shot forth, before the foundations of the earth were laid, before the legions of angels first assembled. Yea, he who possessed wisdom ere the waters were parted asunder, or the winds of the firmament ever blew. He alone, the dreaded one, did reign, still reigns, and shall reign over all things forever. From everlasting to everlasting, El Shaddai, the Almighty God, the creator of all life, who made man in his own image, to whom he gave a heart of flesh, and has imparted him with the 5 operations of Elohim, eyes to see, ears to hear, smell, and taste, that he might enjoy the pleasures of eating and drinking, whereby he may obtain strength and healing from the foods and medicines of the earth that he made for him. And feeling also, both to the touch and in the inward parts, to know what was in his heart, whether he would serve ha-Elohim, his maker, or no. And besides these, he endowed him with good sense and reason and speech to interpret the things that are seen and heard, that he might comprehend and articulate his thoughts, becoming fully aware, possessing the power to make sound decisions. And in his abounding loving kindness, he granted him understanding, yea, and knowledge also, that he might have withal to pursue the things that are pleasing to the Lord and depart from evil. He to whom all honor, worship, and praise is due, the omnipotent God, God of the Hebrews who made the sea and the dry land, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the God of Israel, the true and living God, the author of love, time, life, and sound, who spake and it was created. For all things are done at the words of his mouth, who breathed life, the one spirit, into our first father Adam, from whom we all are come to the world, which he made for the serving, nurturing, and nourishment of man, his most precious creation, to whom he gave his most righteous law, for righteousness belonging to him alone, who is just in all things, who keep his covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, even to the seed of his beloved friend Abraham, even to us, the children of Israel. Ben Isaac and Maccabim, sons of the ancient Maccabees. For he is our God, the ancient of days. For before the day was, is he. The God of the spirits of all flesh. El Quanah, the jealous God. El Rakum, the merciful God. El Rapah, the God of healing, the one and only true healer. The God of truth. Hagadol, the great. Hagibor, the mighty. Wehanorah, and the terrible. Elohim Zebaot, the Lord of hosts is his name. He is the King of glory. Blessed be the glorious name of his kingdom forever and ever. For he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Giving due respect to the chief men, princes, dignitaries, officers, mothers in Israel, brothers and sisters, I stand before you this day, Nasi Zakaryah, a title bestowed upon me by the order of Chiefs Eleazar, ben Lewi, ben Dodo, aka Matitya, father of the house of the Maccabees, my teacher and leader, in whose honor I speak and continue the legacy of his name, works, and teachings, in the name of our God, and the holy law given us at the mouth of his prophet Moshe, reinstituted by and in accordance with the protocol set forth by Nasi Yaakov, head knock of all the Hebrews, teacher, leader, and founder of Ben Isaac, the first Hebrew Israelite congregation in the United States of America, whither we have been exiled because of our sins and the sins of our fathers, whom our God commissioned to bring his people together, to the intent that he might open our eyes and give us ears to hear and a heart to perceive, as it is at this day, so that we may keep his commandments, return to him, and repair the breach. I bid you in the ancient tongue of our fathers, Shabbat Shalom Lechem.
Shabbat Shalom Laka.
Ruk Shemo. Oh, my bad. Thank you, guys. Please remain standing as we recite the Constitution of Israel in Hebrew from Exodus 20. Please repeat after. Elohim.
Wa'iraber Elohim.
Et kal ha-debarim.
Et kal ha-debarim.
Ha'ale lemor.
Ha'ale lemor.
Anoki El Shaddai Eloheka.
Anoki El Shaddai Eloheka.
Asher hotzetika.
Asher hotzetika.
Me'eretz Misraim.
Me'eretz Misraim.
Mibeit Abadim.
Mibeit Abadim.
Lo yihye leka.
Lo yihye leka.
Elohim acherim.
Elohim acherim.
Al panai.
Al panai.
Lo ta'aseh leka fesel.
Lo ta'aseh leka fesel.
V'kal timuna.
V'kal temuna.
Asher bashamayim ima'al.
Asher b'shamayim ima'al.
V'asher ba'aretz mitachat.
Wa'asher ba'aretz mitachat.
V'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz.
Wa'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz.
Lo tishtachaweh lahem.
Lo tishtakaweh lahem.
Ve'lo ta'abdem.
Ve'lo ta'abdem.
Ki anoki el shaka.
Ki anoki El Shaddai Eloheka.
El Quanah. Raon.
U'Queraon.
Abot albanim.
Abot abanim.
Al shileshim.
Al shilashim.
Va'ribeim.
Wa'aribeim.
Lesonai.
Lesonai.
Ve'oseh chesed.
Ve'oseh
La'alafim leohabai.
Alafim la'abai.
Ulshomrei mitzotai.
U'shomrei mitzotai.
Lo tisa et shem.
Lo tisa et Shem.
El Shaddai Eloheka.
El Shaddai Eloheka.
Lashao.
Lashao.
Ki lo yinakwe El Shaddai.
Ki lo yinakwe El Shaddai.
Et asher yisa.
Et asher yisa.
Et shemo lashao.
Et shemo lashao.
Zakor et yom HaShabbat.
Zekor et yom HaShabbat.
Lekwadsho.
Lekwadsho.
Ki sheshet yamim ta'abod.
Ki sheshet yamim ta'abod.
Ve'asita kal melakteka.
Ve'asita kal melakteka.
Ve'yom hashbi'i.
V'yom hashbi'i.
Shabbat la El Shaddai Eloheka.
Shabbat la El Shaddai Eloheka.
Lo ta'aseh kal melaka.
Lo ta'aseh kal melaka.
Ata.
Ata.
Ubinka.
Ubinka.
Ubiteka.
Ubiteka.
Abdeka.
Abdeka.
Wa'amatka.
Wa'amatka.
Ubemteka.
Ubemteka.
Ve'girka asher bish'areka.
V'girka asher b'shareka.
Ki sheshet yamim asa El Shaddai.
Ki sheshet yamim asa El Shaddai.
Et hashamayim.
Et hashamayim.
Ve'et haaretz.
Ve'et haaretz.
Et hayam.
Et hayam.
Ve'et kal asher bam.
Ve'et kal asher bam.
Vayanak bayom hashbi'i.
Vayanak hayom hashbi'i.
Al kein berak El Shaddai.
Al kein berak El Shaddai.
Et yom HaShabbat.
Let yom HaShabbat.
Vayikvad shehu.
Vayikon shehu.
Kabed et abika.
Kabed et abika.
Ve'et imeka.
Ve'et imeka.
Lema'an yarikun yameka.
Lama'an yarikun yameka.
Al ha'adama.
Al ha'adama.
Asher El Shaddai Eloheka.
Asher El Shaddai Eloheka.
Notein lak.
Lo teilach.
Lo tirzach.
Lo tirzach.
Lo tin'af.
Lo tin'af.
Lo tignob.
Lo tignob.
Lo ta'aneh.
Lo ta'aneh.
Bereaka el shakwe.
Bereaka el shakwe.
Lo takmod.
Lo takmod.
Beit reeka.
Beit reeka.
Lo takmod.
Lo takmod.
Eshet reeka.
Eshet reeka.
Ve'abdo.
Ve'abdo.
Wa'amato.
Wa'amato.
Weshoro,
Weshoro.
Wakamoro,
Kamoro.
Mikol Asher L'Re'eka.
Ko asher l're'eka.
Shavu, you may be seated. And all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the voice of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you transgress not. And the people stood afar off. But Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, ye have seen that I have talked to you from heaven. You shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall you make unto you gods of gold. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stones. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. Now thou shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. Shabbat Shalom. Had some technical difficulties, so getting started a little late. But that ain't stopping no show. Got some good information to bring. This is part 2 concerning the dietary laws. We're going to go over a few more things concerning clean versus unclean, prohibitions of what should and should not be eaten according to Torah law, and the definition of fat, not in English, but in Hebrew, and not just in Hebrew, but according to the Torah, because the book is a foundation of truth for all things, especially the Torah, because this is the law of life that God gave to Israel when he brought us out of Egypt to govern ourselves as an independent people, living by the order of life that God established. These laws were coincide with the order of life that God established at creation. The same laws that he gave to Adam. Again, there were laws appended, added to, or revisions added to as time went on. For instance, because of the relationship between Leah and Rachel, right? After Jacob was deceived into marrying Leah first, and they created a rivalry between sisters. So later on, there became a law in the time of Moses that a man should not marry a woman and her sister in her lifetime to rival her, right? So more or less from the beginning to the end of the Torah, these are the laws, with the exception of the ones that have been added because of situations throughout time since the flood. This was the same order of life that God established for the first world, though they did not keep it, right? So what we're going to do today is use the book to explain the book, right? Use the book to learn the law. And why that's important, because sometimes we might look up words in a dictionary, and what happens in translation from any language to another language, certain amount of the meaning is lost, or because two languages don't share the same logic, you can't give a exact definition or get a clear understanding of what this word means when it's translated into another language. And that happens in multiple languages, in every language. It's not just from Hebrew to English, right? But because Hebrew is structured a certain way, and we have the book to give us reference to that structure, and since this is the language that God spoke everything into existence in at creation, and it's also the same language that he gave us the law, so the same language that established the order of life at creation is the same language that he gave us the law in, which coincides with the order of life. So why that's important, because when he says thou shalt and thou shalt not, it is in accordance with the order of life that was established by God, and the language itself corresponds to the laws that God set up according to the order of life since the beginning, right? So it was not a coincidence, that the seventh day was his rest day. He thought all of these things before he did them, right? God is present and past, present and future, all at the same time. He's ubiquitous, everywhere, all at once. So because of this, everything was set up to coincide. Something else I heard my teacher say today, one of my teachers, I forget if it was Chief Sean or Chief Mikael. that you might have in your mind to change course, right? And change your mind, right? And do things differently, thinking to escape, right? The punishment of God or our responsibilities, or to be held accountable for our actions before God, thinking that you can leave off from this or that you can do something differently outside of the way God said and still prevail. Well, here's the thing. You're dealing with the actual puppet master himself. You're dealing with the creator himself who is in control of all things, right? So when you thought to change your mind, he knew you was going to change your mind before you changed your mind. So he set up things according to the result that would have already happened because he knew you was going to change your mind before you knew you was going to change your mind, right? So something to keep in mind that as we make decisions throughout our lifetime, we can either block ourselves from getting closer to God, or you can help yourself open the gates by humbling ourselves for wisdom to enter in and open our eyes to the things that God is trying to teach us. Though a lot of times we block ourselves because we are too stubborn to learn them. We are too proud to learn. So with all of that said, I ask again that we be open-minded and come to these teachings as an empty vessel, and let the book pour into us the knowledge that is trying to teach us through the definitions of these words, not bringing our own indoctrinated teachings from our youth into this, and to try to make understanding of the words that we're about to read according to what I think I already know. So instead, let's let the words teach us what it means without bringing my own preconceived notions into this, right? And this is how I try to read the book now, because I read it and I say, I don't know, man, but that's fat though. But that's fat according to what I was taught in my life in English. But is that what the Torah teaches us what fat is? And so this is where we need the book to give us a better understanding. We might say, but that's what I learned in school, so I know that to be a fact. And that's not always true. I mean, they told us Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves and Christopher Columbus found America. We found that wasn't true, right? So this is where we have to rethink everything. And if it doesn't match up with the exact words by definition in Torah, then that's when you discard it, because that's going to block us from being able to get a clear understanding of the law. And it's going to block us from God being able to teach us new things and open our eyes to these laws. My brother Abraham made a great point today, Chief Abraham, great teachings. He said, God has to open your eyes. But if we are too proud, God can't open our eyes. Right. So pride it comes in many forms, and it's the enemy. It's the real enemy. Yeah, right. It's not me. It's not the system. It's not the government. I am my own worst enemy. Right. And pride is the thing that gets in the way of us learning. Right. So forget about what I think I know, because that's also a version of pride. Now I already know that already. That's the same thing that makes us get angry when we get rebuked, right? No, I know. You can't teach me nothing. Yeah, okay. Well, if that was the case, then we mastered everything that there is to learn about life, and then we can't go any further. My teacher had a statement. I started to say it last week, and I went off. Lost track, mind moving ahead to the topics, and didn't circle back to give the complete quotation, right? So my teacher used to say that life is a never-ending school, but it didn't end there. He said, you never stop learning until the day you die. And then he said, but that's twofold. He said it could mean that the day you die, you will be learning until the day you die, right? Or the day you decide to stop learning is the day you begin to die. Ooh, that's heavy, ain't it? And that's because without learning, we're only going to end up, pride is going to drag us down to the pit. And that's the way it goes. And pride is the thing that stops us from learning. So humility is the beginning of righteousness. And when we come into this, as we hear these teachings today, you're going to hear some things that you never heard before. And before we jump into it, I'm going to make another point that my teacher, when it comes to speaking truth, you have to have courage. You can't be afraid of what people are going to think or how people might take it. But when you know something to be proven by facts and evidence, this is where your courage should come from. Because we should not be afraid when the truth is, when we are on the side of the truth, right? Because the truth prevails over all things. Truth bears the victory over them all. So it doesn't matter who's going to like it, who's not going to accept it, who chooses to agree with it or chooses not to agree with it. The point is that if it's true, it's true, and the truth needs no defense because the proof is in itself, right? So with that said, my teacher brought certain things to the congregation. The first one to teach certain things in the camp, in Ben Isaacin, the first Hebrew Israelite congregation in the United States of America. Yes, I did say that in every introduction. And yes, I stand firm by that because it is a fact. Because before that, before Prince Yaakov came on the scene, all the rest of the congregations were still calling themselves Black Jews, and they operated according to Judaism. And that's why some of these camps today still operate under the foundation of Judaism, because their teachers, right, now calling themselves Israelites ever since after Prince Yaakov, right? But before that, they were basing their entire congregation on Judaism, and that's why some of them bear the title of rabbi, right? And some went to rabbinical school, some did not, and still call themselves rabbi, right? So with that said, I don't want to create a division, but I just want to clarify history, right? Our modern day history of how Israel started or was reignited in the United States of America in these latter days, right? So my teacher, Chief Eleazar, was the first one to bring certain things to the camp, right? And from what he told me, without confirming or discussing with Prince Yaakov first, because he was given the freedom to do so. And not that he was rebelling. He was given the freedom to do so because his teacher and his leader trusted him that he would teach according to the book and not go off and lean upon his own misunderstanding. It's not called leaning upon your own understanding, because if your own understanding was correct, then leaning upon it wouldn't be wrong. So it's leaning upon your own misunderstanding. And that's not what he was doing. Instead, he leaned on the book to explain the book. And that's where we get this from. That's where it came from. That's why we teach this way. That's why he taught the teachers, all of us, that if you can't show it in the book, don't teach it. Right. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go into the book. But back to the topic, before we jump in, he was the first to teach certain things. He was the first one to stand up and have the courage in front of the entire congregation. Mind you, this isn't a time where if people didn't like what you said, they put you in a circle and they beat you. Even if you was a teacher, even if you was an officer, you get beat by the officers. And that's exactly what happened. So he got up and he taught the congregation that Shabbat begins on Friday night. Ain't that right? Everybody said, that's right, that's right. And he said, then why are we still watching TV and going out and hanging out on Friday nights? And the place got quiet. I wasn't there, but from what he told me, first account, right? First witness account, because he was there and he's the one that said it, and the place went quiet. And some brothers started grilling him and got mad while he's teaching, pushed up faces in teachings. Later on, coincidentally, right, which I'm not agreeing with the certain context of that word coincidence, because there's no such thing as a coincidence, but coincidentally, meaning in the progression, consequently in the sequence of incidents, right? After that happened, he was brought before the judges of the camp and on false charges. Yeah, I'm gonna spit it out, and not gonna go too deep into detail or name any names, but he suffered consequences all for teaching the truth, because certain brothers didn't like what he taught. It was not only concerning that, it was concerning images. When he was the first one in the camp to bring that images is against the law, having images, making images, wearing images. Mind you, Prince Yaakov had a lion on his ring. So certain things were brought because my teacher understood that the truth is what is important and prevails over all things. And if we fear God, then we will stand by the truth regardless of who it might affect or who might not take it the right way. And as teachers, we have a responsibility to teach the truth, regardless of who likes it and who doesn't like it. And that is part of our displaying or proving our faithfulness before God. That just like the prophets who got up and spoke God's word to a people that didn't want to hear it, to spoke God's word to a people that were going to jump them or beat them or even kill them for speaking these words, so be it. I'm going to speak the words of truth according to what we can prove, using the book to prove the book. So without further ado, I'm going to pick up where we left off. Leviticus chapter 11. And I have some notes here. Bear with me. I was having some technical difficulty earlier because a lot of tabs open, just because I have notes and I have different references, to back up what we're about to read, or to use the book, different references in the book to back up the book, right? And then also some evidence of what we learned from the study of the Hebrew language and the study of the definitions of what the Hebrew is telling us that these words mean, right? And again, translation is lost sometimes in Hebrew, but it's very important for us to understand that we stick to as close as possible by letting the book explain the book, right? So the definitions and translation in English might not get it, but the book is going to help us get a better understanding just by the context of where we're in a minute. Okay, so Leviticus 11. You got Leviticus 11? Mm-hmm. All right, scroll. I believe it's 7 or 9, speaking about the unclean fish that are clean to eat, or all that move in the waters.
It was 9.
All right, you're right. Go ahead, Tom Shee.
These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. Mm-hmm. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all the move in the waters, and of the tiny living thing.
Tiny? That's not the
any living thing in the water, they shall be an abomination unto you.
Okay, take your time, okay? They shall be even an abomination unto you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall have their carcasses in abomination. So in order for us to be able to eat it, and again, this is concerning what we shall eat. So if it's clean, we can eat it. It must have fins and scales. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination to you. Qasqeset, right? It's a kuf. Again, this is me bringing my English pronunciation to the letter Q, right? But the kuf is a k sound. So it's qasqeset, rather say qasqeset, right? It's different. It's a little different to a K. It's supposed to have a little bit of a deeper in your throat, sort of a, right? Qasqeset. And as we lost our land, we lost everything. Shalom, brother, saying that's the way we pronounce the ancient Hebrew. Well, you got to have somebody that lived in those times to come back in these times and prove that to me, because I got to go by what these words are pronounced today, because that's all we got. So I'm just going to say that. And I don't read anywhere where the kuf is followed by a U or a W, in Hebrew, right? Or the sound, or that there's nothing to prove that. So we're just going to keep it as qasqeset, but be a different sound. This is logic now. This is where some of us have to use logic and have common sense also, because we've been so far away from our own culture and our own language, that the kaf and the het is you can clearly see the difference. Kaf, het, right? Even though you might see certain words spelled in English with a K and it's really a het, or an H and it's really a het, right? And you know, they're saying it's like a hard H, but this is a lack of being able to translate something into another language, even when it boils down to something simple as pronunciation, right? So the chet is a sound, and the kaf is like a C, but the kuf is a different letter. It can't have the exact same pronunciation as a kaf. So, right. Okay, back to this now. What is a scale? What is qasqeset? Because we're not looking up what scales mean, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're using the book to understand the book. So we need to be able to speak the language or get to the bottom of the definition of the language, right? So qasqeset, meaning we need to understand what God is calling scales in English, right? If we were speaking Hebrew, I could explain this a lot better, but I don't know how to speak Hebrew, right? We're still all learning the language. So instead, we look up the word and we come to find that it means scales. But then you go and look up, there's like 4 different kind of scales. We touched on this last week, so I'm just going to get to the part that I didn't go over. We have placoid scales, cycloid scales, centenoid scales, and ganoid scales. 4 different kind of scales on fish. Last week, I was making a difference, showing the difference between cycloid, centenoid, how both of those are different from placoid and ganoid scales. And I gave a explanation that the cycloid scales and the centenoid scales are large enough to see, and the placoid scales are not, but I didn't tell you the difference between the ganoid scales, right? So placoid scales are the scales on a shark, right? And again, this is not what God calls qasqeset. So I'm just giving you an English translation of what is classified in English as scales to prove that this does not fall under the definition of qasqeset. So we're not figuring out what's are scales according to Leviticus 11. We're figuring out what are qasqeset according to the Torah definition of the word, right? And so the Torah is going to give us, when we look up what they are and what they're made of and how they're structured, we're going to understand why the Torah does not classify these other 2 scales, placoid and ganoid, as qasqeset. So it's not only because of what they're made of. It's the structure of a placoid scales. It's made of dentin, which is like the same thing that's what it makes up the core material of our teeth, right? Not the outside, not the enamel, not something keratin, which is in your fingernails and your hair, but the inside of your teeth, right? And so covered with an enamel-like substance, right? So it's made of dentin. It has enamel over it, just like teeth do, featuring a central pulp cavity. It has some pulp in the middle, different to the pulp, obviously, of a fruit, but it's, for lack of a better word, this is how science explains it in English. Mind you, appearance, it's invisible to the naked eye, but under a microscope, they look like a field of tiny, sharp teeth. They are so closely packed together that they form a continuous, uniform mat over the shark's body. Somebody might say, man, sharks don't have scales. Well, they're microscopic. And because of the texture is how we know, and without a microscope, you can still prove that there are scales. So even though you cannot see them, you can definitely feel them. Running your hand from a shark's head to its tail feels relatively rough, like coarse sandpaper, because you are pushing against thousands of tiny microscopic tooth-like points, right? And they're shaped just like shark teeth, if you look it up, right? They're cartilaginous or cartilaginous fish, like sharks and rays and skates have this type of scales or skin. It reduces the water resistance. All right, we're not worried about the function. Now, ganoid scales, they're thick, hard, diamond-shaped plates rich in inorganic bone salt. So they have bone salts in them, thick, and they're made of like a bony substance, fitting together like a puzzle pieces together, rather than overlapping, not like this, like scales do. Instead, they're like this, and they have lines in between, right? And they look like shiny interlocking suit of armor. Now, listen to that definition, because that comes to where we're going to understand a little bit about the definition of qasqeset. Because they are thick, heavy, diamond-shaped plates that do not overlap, you can clearly trace the individual perimeter of each scale. So because they don't overlap, you can measure exactly how big the surrounding circumference is, or the perimeter of each scale. When it's overlapping, you can only see the part that's sticking out. You can't see what's underneath, right? They feel hard, slick, and bony because they're coated in ganoid. This is where they get the name ganoid scales, right? And it's a substance, enamel-like substance similar to the enamel on teeth. So fish that have these are sturgeons, gars, and bichurs, I guess. I don't know how to pronounce it. So according to the literal definition of the word qasqeset, the biblical Hebrew text of the Torah, ganoid scales do not qualify as qasqeset or placoid. They're physically incapable of being removed without tearing or destroying the underlying skin of the fish. So here's why, according to Torah Hebrew, qasqeset cannot include the scales that are actually part of the skin. So in other words, in order to remove ganoid scales or placoid scales, you got to rip off the entire skin of the fish. You can descale a fish that has ctenoid and cycloid scales. Those are qasqeset. They can be fully removed. Now, here's why, according to the definition of the word qasqeset. In biblical Hebrew, the root qasqeset refers to an external removable covering or clothing. And here's where we prove that. Outside of the dietary laws in Leviticus, the exact same word is used in the Tanakh to describe Goliath's armor. So in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 5, it uses the word shiryon qasqasim. And it means, it's the words for coat of mail. And what it means in Hebrew is a coat of, or scale armor is what it means. Scaled armor. So armor that is like looking like scales or like shingles on a roof. So by biblical definition, armor or a garment is something an individual puts on over their body, which can be unbuckled, stripped off, or shed without peeling away the actual skin or flesh underneath. So because of the definition of qasqeset and how we see how it's used in other parts of the book, we can see that this can't be the part of the skins of the skin of the fish, but has to be something that can be removed and separated from the skin without removing the skin or the flesh. And this is where the logic of the Hebrew language comes in. That logic does not exist in English. When you look up scale, it has nothing to do with something that connects to the skin. It has nothing to do with something that can be removed. But the definition of qasqeset means it's something, because it's used like an armor in the same context of what you can use that same Hebrew word to describe armor. That proves that it's something that goes over skin and it's not part of the skin. Ganoid scales are not a garment. They are not armor. They are modified vascular. Neither are placoid scales. They are modified vascular bone plates, which means blood flows through them, right? Or the vascular system of the fish, chemically fused directly to the fish's dermis. To pull a ganoid scale off a fish like a sturgeon, it requires a knife to literally hack into the flesh, ripping the actual skin off or apart. This is why we can prove with Torah just by the definition of qasqeset, using other parts of the book to prove Torah, right? Like 1 Samuel 17, verse 5, describing Goliath's armor, that qasqeset, the word for scales, cannot mean something that is permanently attached to skin that must be removed, right? Okay, so again, this is where we need to understand the logic of the language, and the logic has a lot to do with us understanding Torah, right? And this is why we use other parts of the book to give us a breakdown of what that word means. Keep all of this in mind, because we're going to hear some more things today that we might not have heard that might sound strange to us, but we have to stick to the definition of these words according to the Torah, not just the definition in the Hebrew English dictionary, because the book teaches us what words mean. Now, the Torah makes a very strict distinction between an animal's skin and its scales. Because ganoid scales and placoid scales are structurally locked into the fish's skeletal and dermal layers, the Torah text legally classifies them as a modified bumpy skin or a scute, rather than an independent scale layer. For a scale to textually exist in Hebrew as a separate entity, which is what Qasqeset describes in the Torah, it must be an independent physical structure that sits on top of the skin like armor, rather than being an extension of the skin itself. All right. So again, using the book to understand the book. All right. So with that said, there's some talk or association with modern science, or the definition of fat according to modern science in English, that fish skin is fat, right? And we went over last week of the fat that God commanded us that should not be eaten in Leviticus chapter 7, and gives us a distinct definition. If you go there real quick, Leviticus chapter 7, please, scribe, I need you to stay with me. Okay. Okay, go to verse. We're going to go through these chapters later, but I don't want to take too much time going verse by verse through these offerings, because it's something that loses people's attention. When you start going into the order of the offerings and what the Levites must do to this animal, after a while, it's like, this is boring, right? And it's not really something that we apply to our lives today. So it doesn't hold people's attention. But when it comes for us to understand what God is telling us should be eaten and what should not be eaten, and it has a lot to do with understanding the anatomy of the animal. And since these offerings give us a detailed description of the anatomy of an animal, and none of us have ever cut open an animal to see what this looks like, we need to be able to go by exactly what Torah says and what God calls forbidden according to the definitions, not just all definitions of the word fat in English, right? Because science in English tells us fat can be, if you want to get technical, avocado oil. The natural oils present in the meat of the avocado is fat. The natural oils or the natural fats in flaxseed oil is what science in English tells us it is also included under the definition of fat. But in Hebrew, according to Torah, this is not the cheleb or the peder, which is the two words that we read in Leviticus for fat, when God tells us that these fats are forbidden. So how they differ from a fish's skin, or if you want to get technical, there's little white lines that you see in the flesh of the salmon. You can only see it in salmon because it's pink or dark orange. It should be closer to pink if you're eating wild caught fish, or something that was caught with a hook, line, and sinker in the wild. If you're eating that type of salmon, then the flesh will be more pink. If it's more orange, it's likely Atlantic salmon, which is farmed, because they eat something different. They eat a different feed, right? But that's another point. So if you look at the white lines in the fish itself, in the meat itself, that's technically also called fat, according to English. Is that the fat that God said we should not eat? No, it's not. That is intramuscular fat. And the same thing is present inside the fat or inside the muscle structure of a cow, sheep, goat, gazelle, roebuck, hart, all of the animals that we read about that are clean to eat. But the Torah does not make any reference to that fat. As a matter of fact, English tells us that that is fat. There is no reference to any fat be removed according to Torah or in any other part of the Tanakh that references what we learned from modern day science in English is in between the flesh, inside the muscle itself. They call it marbleized fat in the steak itself. Nowhere in the Torah makes any reference, or in the entire Tanakh makes any reference to that in English or Hebrew. Period. It's not a command in Leviticus of what to do with it. There's no reference in any part of the rest of the Tanakh that talks about the fat inside the muscle or the flesh of the animal itself. It's not in the book, period. So if we're going to stick to what the Torah is teaching us, as far as I know, that's not fat according to God. Because God strictly, and if it is, he didn't make a reference as it being forbidden. So what he forbade us to eat, if we go through this chapter in Leviticus chapter 7 and in Leviticus chapter 3, there's also reference in Leviticus 1 concerning peder, and there's reference concerning in Leviticus 2, Leviticus 8, concerning cheleb and peder, chet lamed beit, cheleb and peder, pei dalet resh, right? And so we need to look up not just what these words mean in the Hebrew English dictionary, but we need to follow what the book is teaching us that these words mean, right? So with that said, give me Leviticus chapter 7, verse 22. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, verse 23 now.
23.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox, or of sheep, or of goat.
Okay, so just first off, for the sake of getting an accurate translation, the word manner is not in there. It says no fat. It says all fat. The translation is kal cheleb, all, not fat. Let's just use the word cheleb so we get a better understanding, because when we hear fat, we think of anything that we've been taught to categorize from what English taught us as fat. But let's stick to what the Torah is teaching us, and let's just think according to what the book is breaking down, and it's going to explain to us what cheleb is, right? Kal cheleb, so all cheleb, shor wekeseb waez, of ox, of sheep, or of goat, lo tokelu, ye shall not eat. You all shall not eat, right? Or shall not be eaten, right? Okay, Tamshi?
And the fat of the beast that dieth of itself, and the fat of that which is torn with beasts, may be used in any other use, but ye shall in no wise eat of it.
Right. So cheleb, nebela of a carcass, we cheleb terefa, and the cheleb of that which has been torn, yaseh lekal melaka, shall be done or used or to produce in any kind of work or in all work. We akol lo tokluhu, but to be eaten, but to eat, it shall not be eaten. That's the translation. Okay, so that means they could use it, the fat of one of these beasts, if it died of itself or if it's torn with beasts, because remember, there's other parts in the law that we read last week that forbid us from eating the animal that died of itself or the animal that is torn of beasts, or if we get a more specific translation in Hebrew, in one of those verses where it says any animal that had an organic defect. So one of his organs was damaged or diseased or infected, right? Then you can't eat the flesh of that animal. And this is specifically talking about the fat of the beast. We know we can't eat that fat because it's called cheleb, and it's already told us you cannot eat the cheleb, but it's saying you can use that fat. You don't have to discard the whole animal. You could actually use the fat that died of the animal that died of itself or was torn with beast or had an organic defect. Even though you can't eat its flesh, you can use the fat to make soap. You can use it to cure leather. You can use it to make lotion, or whatever it is that you can make out of that fat and use it. You can use it. It's a clean beast, right? But it's forbidden to eat. Okay, Tamshi, verse 26.
26.
Verse 25.
For whosoever eateth the fat of the beasts, of which men offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, even the soul that eateth it shall be cut off from his people.
Okay, so kikal okel cheleb. For of all that eat the cheleb, Min habehema, of the beast, asher yakrib mimenu, which you shall be offered from among you, Ishe El Shaddai, for an offering of fire unto the Lord, where nikrita ha-nefesh, that soul shall be cut off, where okelet ha-okelet, that soul that eateth it shall be cut off, me'ameha, from his people. Right? Another thing to note that I learned through this process of studying Leviticus 3 and Leviticus 7, that the nefesh is the feminine. Nefesh, the word for soul, the word that we've been taught in English by the translation through the dictionary, that a nefesh does not only mean soul, but it means a person, right? To read in English. But nefesh itself is a feminine word. So when it says me'ameh, it says from his people, it says me'ameha. It really doesn't translate to from his people. It really translates to from her people, from among her people, because it's concerning a nefesh, and a nefesh is a feminine word. That's why it's called nafshot when it says souls and not nafshim, right? Or nefeshim, right? It's called nafshot, is the plural form of nefesh, which makes it a feminine word. So that means the soul of a person is a feminine thing, right? And this is another thing where you might say, oh, man, my soul ain't feminine. Yeah, man out there saying that. No, it's that we need to stop thinking in English. And we need to understand that there are masculine and feminine attributes, or these words are categorized by God as masculine and feminine because they bear masculine and feminine attributes, not necessarily male and female, right? So something to think about when we learn this language, right? Because it has a lot to do with us being able to understand God, right? You can't think American and do the law in Hebrew. It's not going to work, because you're going to find contradicting perceptions of our American way of thinking when we're trying to translate this law from Hebrew. And we're going to bring in our own perceptions, our own understanding, or our own misunderstanding of what we think words mean. When we have to relearn, we have to be retaught. We have to learn the book all over in Hebrew. And that's why I said, try your best. I ask that we all try our best to start thinking in Hebrew once we learn the definition of these words, and unlearn thinking in English, unlearn translating according to the logic of the English language. Okay. Now let's back up a little bit. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 3, because we need to learn what chaleb is now. So it tells us right there in those verses that we cannot eat chaleb, and it's specific to tell us which animals we should not eat the chaleb of, which is the ox, the sheep, and the goat. And then later, the next verse tells us even more specific that of any of the animals that are for offerings to God, that is the chaleb that we are forbidden to eat, right? And not to say you can go ahead and eat the chaleb of a deer or a moose or an antelope, right? Which we learned are all clean animals that chew the cud and are part the cloven hoof, right? So, but we know that when it's concerning the chaleb, it's talking about that should not be eaten or that is forbidden. It's talking about the animals that we can offer for offerings, or of the clean animals. That is the part of the animal that we cannot eat. So now we need to look to Leviticus 3 as a reference to find out exactly what chaleb is as described by Torah. And is there any other parts of the book that talk about chaleb that's going to give us a definition of what chaleb is? Instead of just saying, oh, well, it must be fat because, all the translations translated as fat. So it must be fat according to what we've been taught by scientists, what fat is. Instead of saying we need to be taught by God through the words of the Tanakh, what he calls fat, what he calls chaleb, rather say, because everything that's fat or chaleb is not everything that's fat, according to reading the Torah, right? So, waiting on this page to load. Until then, go to Leviticus chapter 3. If I say Leviticus chapter 3, you start reading from go like this. like this. Okay, go ahead. Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1.
And if his oblation be a sacrifice of peace offering, if he offer it of the herd, whether it be a male or female, he shall offer it without blemish before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand upon the head of his offering at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar round about.
So just for context, you know, it's confusing sometimes reading English because it says oblation, and then we read offering in another verse, and then we think it's two different things. You know, peace offering and a thanksgiving offering and a vow. So by reading Leviticus 3 and Leviticus 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, we learned that a peace offering is also a thanksgiving offering, and a vow is also considered a form of a peace offering, right? So thanksgiving offering, vow are types of peace offerings, and it makes perfect sense if you think about it, because you're giving thanks to God. It's a peace offering. It's not just about reconciling when we've done wrong, but to give thanks to him, right? Shilamim does not only mean a peace offering, because shalem is also the same root word of shalom, and it means to be whole or complete. So to give complete praise to God, we can't leave out that's shilamim, this complete offering, this peace offering, or, you know, the extensive translation of shilamim is not only a peace offering, but a completion of offerings would include thanksgiving and a vow, right? Because they're not categorized as burnt offerings. The entire offering does not get burnt on the altar. They're not categorized as sin offerings, and they're not categorized as trespass offerings, which we would think those two are the same things, but they are not. So in Leviticus 19, concerning the peace offerings, that it must be offered at your own free will, and if you're eaten at all on the third day, that is also the same rules that apply if we read Leviticus 2, 3, 4, and 5, that apply to a peace, a thanksgiving offering, or the offerings for a vow, right? And so why is all of this important? Because it's going to tell us, for one, that we understand the language a little bit better, right? And if you're saying peace, then it also comes with, you know, complete. You can't have grudge in your heart and you're telling me peace. You're saying shalom, because that's not complete. That's not whole. That's not. Also, the word shalem is also means to recompense or to make restitution, right? So if there's no restitution, then that takes us back to the teachings from a few weeks ago. You can't repent if there's no restitution made. There's no repentance without making amends. And if you're making amends to make good that which was done wrong, then you need to make restitution. You need to pay back to make amends. You need to make things good again. You need to make things whole, shalem again. And we can be talking like we're at peace with each other, and we haven't made amends with each other. We haven't made restitution. And all of this, it comes from the definition of shalem, right? So if we haven't made amends, then how can we say we're repentant? If we're cool again and we made peace, which is shalom, which is part of shalem, is also related through the logic of the language, the same root word, then if I made peace with you, I should have made restitution for the thing wherein I trespassed, or I should have reconciled, because that's also shalem. I should make whole again or complete our relationship by mending where I made a breach, or where I made the break, or the break in our trust, in my trust, or my faithfulness towards you. And it's the same way with us towards God. If we're bringing a shalem, a peace offering, then we must make restitution by the time we bring that offering. That's why it says you bring the offering and then you make restitution. It's like it's supposed to be happening at the same time. You can't go talk about, I'm gonna bring my offering to God and I ain't gonna make restitution. So all of these are important to understand what a peace offering is. And God is teaching us through the definition of the word for peace offering, how we're supposed to make peace with ourselves. Because shalom and shalem are the same root. And shalom is peace, and shalem is to make restitution, to reconcile, or to make whole or complete again. And it's not complete What's complete? Our relationship. What needs to be complete? My faithfulness to you. It can't be halfway. It can't be whenever I feel like it. It got to be what is acceptable to God, or else God is not going to accept that we have actually repented or made it good for the thing wherein we did wrong. And that's why you bring a shalem, shilamim, a peace offering, a reconciling, a restitution. And all these laws have to do with how we treat each other. Now, going back to what the Torah classifies as ha-kabed, because the words teach us the way we're supposed to think and view things, and our perspective of what these words mean is going to give us a better understanding of what God is forbidding us, what he accepts and what he does not accept. And you can't add your own understanding to this. And I don't know what you're talking about, man. Fat, man, I ain't eating it. Then go ahead, do the way you want to do it. But just know you're adding to the Torah. That's not what the Torah says. And here we go. There is a very important translation issue. If we simply translate peder and ha-kabed as fat, we can easily miss what the Torah is teaching. Peder, many lexicons or dictionaries translate it as suet, S-U-E-T, which is a specific type of visceral fat. What is the definition of visceral? Visceral is, because we've talked about this also in the past, visceral behavior, right? So the word visceral is an added two main meanings. It describes a deep, instinctive, emotional reaction felt in the body, like a gut feeling or your innermost. So visceral behavior, when you give into visceral behavior, you're following your own heart, basically. And so this is why I said the forsaking of the senses is, how'd it go? The forsaking of the senses is the saber. It's like a saber. It's like a sword to train ourselves to deter us from visceral behavior, right? Is the saber against visceral behavior. So when you train yourself to forsake your own senses, meaning I'm not going to go after the sight of my eyes. I'm not going to go after because this feels good to me. I'm not going to go after the things that I like, that my innermost lusts are telling me to go after. I'm going to fight my senses. What smells good to me, what tastes good to me, what looks good to me, what feels good to me, right? I'm going to remove these things. What sounds good to me. I'm going to fight those senses, those reactions from my senses, and that is going to give me a sword to fight visceral behavior, to battle the battle against visceral behavior, which is that gut feeling, the following of your own heart's lust. That's one definition of visceral. Now, visceral fat refers literally, the word visceral in referring to fat literally makes a reference to internal organs, or what is called the viscera inside the body. So now when we're talking about visceral fat, or what the suet is, and by the way, the Hebrew English dictionary definition of peder calls it suet or fat. The suet is the fat surrounding the organs, or the layer of fat surrounding the organs with fat on top of it, which is what some dictionaries call the ha-kabed. But there's no distinction that one is the other. In other words, we don't know that the peder is just the layer of that peeled off, that you could peel off like a sheet that covers the inwards of an animal, or even inside our bodies. We have that as well. It's in mammals, right? So we can't say that that's what the suet is, because this is the dictionary telling us that, but it's supposed to describe the fat that surrounds the viscera, which is the visceral, the internal organs, right? And so Leviticus chapter 3 tells us, bring that back up for us. I want you to go down to, and again, I'm not going to go all the way through all these verses. He shall offer the sacrifice of peace offering. Okay, go to verse 4, Tom Sheep.
And the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, which is by the flanks, and the caul above the liver with the kidneys, it shall he take away.
Right. So in this verse, the word for the fat that is on them is the cheleb. Right, let me make sure, because peder is used sometimes, right? The 2 kidneys, cheleb, the fat that covereth the inwards, right? Ha-kabed et ha-kereb. The kereb is the words for the inwards, the inner organs, the internal organs. Ha-kabed is that covers them, right? The keleb that covers them. That's not talking about the fat that's underneath the layer of skin. That's not talking about the fat that's inside the muscles, is intertwined as part of the muscle structure, right? Now we're going to get into how these differ in composition also. And it's going to give us a better understanding of what the Torah is teaching us. But we just going to stick to what the Torah is teaching us that keleb is. The fat that covers the inwards or the internal organs. And how do we know it's talking about the internal organs and all the fat that is upon the inwards? And it goes into detail now. The 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, which is by the loins. And the lobe above the liver. This is, I'm reading you translations, which he shall take away by the kidneys, right? And it translates the same thing if you look up these words in Hebrew. And Aaron's son shall make his smoke on the altar upon the burnt offering, which is upon the wood that is on the fire. It is an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. It's telling us to take ththese things out, or the priest to take these things out and burn them on the altar. And if his offering for a sacrifice be peace offerings, then it shall be, if it be of the flock, male or female, he shall offer without blemish. And if he bring a lamb for his offering, then he shall present it before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand upon the head of his offering and kill it before the Lord, before the tent of meeting. And Aaron's son shall dash the blood thereof against the altar round about. And he shall present of the sacrifice of peace offerings an offering made by fire unto the Lord. The fat thereof, again, the word is used as cheleb. Fat thereof is chelbo, which means his fat or the fat of it. The fat tail entire, the whole tail, because there's a piece that is described in Hebrew as the aliyah, according to Hebrew. And that's not only means the tail, it means the, what do you call it? Sciatic nerve, which is near the end of the spine that is connected to the spine itself and the tail, right? And there's a lot of fat around that. And so God tells us to take that entire piece off, and he take it away by the rump bone, right? Which is the tailbone of the animal, and the fat that covereth the inwards, or the kereb, which is the internal organs, and all the fat that is upon the internal organs is what it says. I'm on verse 10 now. And the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, which is by the loins, and the lobe above the liver, which he shall take away by the kidneys, is describing specific locations in the animal's body where cheleb is located. And it tells us what to do, what to remove, and what to burn on the altar. And if there's no reference to the fat under the skin or the fat that's in between the muscle itself, then technically, if we're keeping it strictly Torah here, God doesn't make reference to those. He doesn't tell us what to do with it. He doesn't tell us to discard it. He doesn't tell us that it's forbidden to eat. Now we're going to go down, and he shall lay his hand upon the head of the offering and kill it, and go to keep going. Let's keep going. Go ahead. Start from verse 11.
And the priest shall burn it on the altar. It is the
Stick with me, man. I'm going to break this down, and we're going to get to the bottom of it using the book. But don't just say I'm speaking my own words. Tom Sheet.
It is the food of the offering made by fire unto the Lord. And if his offering be a goat, then he shall offer it before the Lord. Mm-hmm. And he shall lay his hand upon the head of it and kill it before the tabernacle of the congregation, and the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle the blood thereof upon the altar round about. And he shall offer thereof his offering, even an offering made by fire unto the Lord, the fat that covereth the inwards.
Keleb, ha-kabed et ha-kereb. The fat, the keleb, that covers the internal organs.
and all the fat that is upon the inward.
And the same thing. Ha-kabed asher al ha-kereb. The fat that is upon, or the cheleb that is upon the internal organs.
And the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, which is by the flanks, and the caul above
flanks,
the liver.
it says loins in Hebrew. And the caul is the lobe above the liver. Which is fat, by the way. It's a reference to what the cheleb is.
With the kidneys it shall he take away, and the priest shall burn them upon the altar. It is the food of the offering made by fire for a sweet savior. All the fat is the Lord.
Okay, now let's be clear. All the cheleb is the Lord's. And it gives us a distinct description of what cheleb is. And it doesn't mention anything about skin, doesn't mention anything about the flesh itself. Now, again, this is what we've learned in English. This is fat, and because it has the same, what science says has the same makeup. So now we need to understand what is the difference between the fat that is in between the flesh itself, which is called intramuscular fat in English, or the structural fat, because it's inside the muscles itself. Now, there's a function for that. And it helps our immune system function. It also is what controls or has an effect on our metabolism. This is why people that have a very low outer body fat, right, have a higher metabolism, because that is right underneath your skin, or the fat inside the actual muscle tissue itself. The lower it is, the higher your metabolism is. Right? So you see guys like ripped up like Bruce Lee, very low intramuscular, like in the WWE, have fat. Right? And so what this does is has nothing to do with, your body, your BMI. The intramuscular fat has nothing to do with your BMI, which is your body mass index of how much fat you have. That would be measuring the fat underneath your skin. But this fat has something to do with how fast your muscles recuperate and your like fast twitch reactions, right? And so the cheleb is a specialized visceral fat layer surrounding internal organs like the kidneys, the stomach, and the loins, according to what we're reading in Torah. We're not going by science right now. Different definitions out of a book other than the Torah right now, even though if you look to find, it says the same thing in dictionaries and in medical book and veterinarian references, right? It's characterized by dense, tightly packed adipocytes, fat cells of very moisture content, very little connective tissues that can easily be peeled off the internal organs as a distinct mass. Now, why is that important? Because when God is telling the priest to remove it, he don't have to cut up any meat. He peels it off, and it's surrounding the organs. He gets rid of that, puts that on the altar. Then he takes the pieces that God told us to remove, the liver, the kidneys, the backbone, puts all that on the altar where it's supposed to be burnt. The rest of the animal, after he takes all of the stuff that God commanded the Levites to remove from that animal, the inner organs, the kereb, along with the cheleb, which is the fat that's covering them, and put that on a pile on the altar. Now he has the animal without those things in it. He puts that entire empty carcass that still has all of the skin. Even if they skinned it, it would still have that outer layer of holding what holds the muscle together. And they would then put that entire carcass without the entrails in it on the altar to be burnt. Now, for a burnt offering, that doesn't matter. That doesn't concern, because the entire offering is getting burnt. But for the offerings that the priest was commanded to eat, like the sin offering and the trespass offering, by the way, there's different things to be done by the priest with those offerings. If you read Leviticus 1 through 7, 1 through 8, when you find out why Moses was angry at Aaron's sons, Elazar and Ithamar, because they didn't eat of the sin offering. The flesh of the sin offering was not eaten. And he said, you should have eaten it in the holy place. Well, for certain sin offering, or for the sin offering, when it's for the people, the blood is not brought within the holy place. And it says, for the offerings where the blood is to be brought within the holy place, right? Which is when the entire nation has sinned, or when one of the priests have sinned, that offering gets brought within the holy offering. The other offerings that are for the common people, when they have sinned, the priest does not bring the blood into the holy place, but instead that blood gets sprinkled on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And that is the offerings that the priests and sons eat, because that's their portion, that's their due by God. And Moses said, hey, behold, the blood was not brought within the holy place. Ye should have deed and eaten that offering in a clean place, in the holy place, right? So because the blood was not the type of offering, because it's for the common people, because that blood was not brought within the holy place, they could eat that offering. That's why Moses was angry with. Okay, now we get a better understanding when we read that chapter, right? There's so many lessons in Leviticus chapter 10, right? But back to this now. The structural fat. Why is it called structural fat? Because it's actually part of the muscle, of the flesh of the animal itself. Officially called intramuscular fat. This consists of loose, sporadic, mind you, this is what we learn in definitions from English, right? There's no word for structural fat in Hebrew in the entire Tanakh. There's no word for fat that is, there's no command for what to do with the fat in between the muscles. There's no command saying it's forbidden. There's not even a reference to any fat being in the flesh itself throughout the entire Tanakh. You don't want to take my word for it, which you shouldn't. Go look it up for yourself. And if you find something, bring it in Hebrew to give us a clearer understanding of, is it keleb, is it peder, or is it called something else? Because there's no reference in the entire Tanakh that talks about there being fat in the muscles. So English tells us that this membrane, or these membranes that are in between the structure of the muscles, is called fat. I don't know God to call it that. I haven't known God to call it that throughout my studies in the Tanakh. Again, I'm open to learning. I'm bringing you the information that I've took extensive time to research. If you want to do the same and find something different, and you can bring it to the table and show me in the Tanakh and break it down in Hebrew, and it gives us a clear understanding that there is fat in between the flesh or the muscles of the animal itself, I'm open. I want to hear it. I want to see it. What I found, there is no reference to fat being inside of the muscles. This is what English tells us. That's not what the Tanakh has told us. The Tanakh has not mentioned anything about it. So if the Tanakh don't mention anything about it, I can't add it as part of the law, because then that's adding to the law. That's adding to the Torah. And I will not add to the Torah. And if it sounds strange to you, so be it. We're a people that are returning to our God and getting a better understanding of the law. We don't know it all yet. So a lot of these things are going to sound strange to you. My teacher, Chief Mikael, just said it today. He started his teachings like that. You're going to hear some things in the law that you ain't going to agree with. You're going to hear some things that you never heard before that might sound strange to you. That's a fact. And when we do, it is our job to conform to exactly what it says according to what the words mean, without adding to and without taking away. Because this proves how much we believe God and our faithfulness to God without leaning upon our own misunderstanding. Because, it consists of loose sporadic fat cells deposited between muscle fiber bundles. Because it is structurally part of the living muscle tissue matrix. It has a much higher moisture and protein content, making it soft, flexible, and completely integrated into the muscle, the steak, or the cut of meat. Okay. Now, on a molecular or biological level, the entrail fat which is the fat covering the inwards, which is the caleb, according to Torah, it acts as stable shock absorbers, and it's higher in saturated fatty acids, right? Specifically, polysaturated fatty acids, right? Or saturated fatty acids or poly. And then the structural fat that is in the muscles, it requires fluidity and flexibility to move alongside the contracting muscle tissues as you move, as we work out, as we strain them. Consequently, marbling contains, that's when you look at a steak and has the little white little streaks and lines in the steak, not that big chunk that's on the outside, but the inside, the meat itself, it contains significantly more unsaturated fats, especially oleic acid, the same heart-healthy fatty acid found in olive oil or in the DHAs and EFAs of the fish skin. It's the same molecular structure to the fat that God told us to take away off of the altar. But this is the fat that's the same kind of fat that's in olive oil. Okay, again, I'm just giving you outside facts that show the differences. But we're going to stick to what the Torah tells us is caleb and peder, and we're not going to add to those definitions by saying that also has to include this, that, and the third, and the Torah didn't tell us that it includes this, that, and the third. Now, here's another key facts for us to include in our understanding of how these fats are different. Due to its highly saturated, and this is going to define that our fathers ate the fat within the muscles. I'm gonna break it down to you, okay? And mind you, I'm saying fat within muscles for us to be able to understand according to our prior understanding of what fat is. But really, in all, it's not what God called fat in between the muscles. So our fathers didn't eat fat, just to make that clear. Or they didn't eat caleb. They didn't eat what God forbade us to eat, the fat that He forbid us to eat. Okay, so the entrail fat, the caleb, due to its highly saturated chemical composition, it has a high melting point, around 113 degrees Fahrenheit to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about boiling of water. It remains solid at room temperature and renders down into a dry, firm, waxy tallow that does not easily oxidize, meaning when it doesn't oxidize, it doesn't start to spoil. It doesn't go rancid. Right? This is why oils like olive oil will go rancid if it gets in a warm atmosphere. It don't have to be 100, don't have to boil, right? Okay, so structural intramuscular fat, right, which there's no word for in the Tanakh, thanks to its high monounsaturated content, it has a much lower melting point, often below human body temperature, which means this fat that's in between the muscles of the sheep, the goat, the cow, the ox, it starts to melt at 90 degrees, human body temperature. It liquefies quickly during cooking, coating the surrounding muscle fibers to give meat its characteristic juiciness, tenderness, and rich flavor. Which means now we got to go to Exodus chapter 12, because we're going to use the book to explain some definitions, and then say, you see what I'm telling you? No, we're going to use the book to back this up. Go to Leviticus, Exodus chapter 12. I ain't going to let you down, brother. I ain't going to let you down. To let you down is to let myself down. Elazar, to let you down is to let myself down. I dreamt him last week. Yeah. I woke up crying, but I was happy at the same time. All right, we got that? Exodus chapter 12. Oh, you got that, Malik? Mm-hmm. All right, read to us verse 9. And if I'm spot checking, don't say I'm doing what the jackleg preacher do. It's because we got a lot of space to cover, so I want to go straight to the point and give us the verses that are relevant to what we're speaking about. All right, so which is to understand that caleb does not, the fat that is forbidden by Torah, which is the caleb and peder, does not refer to the intramuscular quote unquote fat that they tell us is fat in English science, right? That's in between the muscles. That's not what God forbid us to eat. So go to, you get it? Exodus chapter 12, verse 9. Tom Shee.
Eat not of it raw nor sodden at all with
Let's
water.
back up a little bit so we can know what we're talking about. All right, so let's go concerning the lamb of the Passover, right? This is what we're talking about here. Go ahead, verse 5.
Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door post of the houses, wherein they shall eat it.
Okay, Tom Shee.
And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
Okay, they shall eat the flesh of the lamb that they roasted, right? That night, roast with fire, and in unleavened bread and bitter herbs shall they eat it. Tom Shee, verse 9.
Eat not of it raw, nor sudden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, and with the pertinence thereof.
Okay, so let's just be clear here for translation to understand that we're talking about the same thing that we read about in Leviticus chapter 3. The same thing that God commanded the priest to take out of these other offerings and burn it on the altar, which is the inwards and the keleb, which is the kereb, the inwards, the internal organs, and the keleb, the fat that's surrounding them, right? He commanded that these not be taken of the Passover lamb. Now, for those of you that know, lamb have a higher intramuscular fat than a grown sheep, right? Anybody's ever eaten lamb, you've seen them little white streaks inside the meat itself. Last time I ate it, I didn't know this information. So me and the brother Yehoshua, the scribe, the original scribe, my original scribe, right? For anybody getting the ideas. We sat there, and after we boiled the flesh, because I read that in 1 Samuel. So after we soaked it, first of all, the blood was drained. My man raised, I used to live near and work with up north, Central Coast, California. He raised the lamb, called me when he bought it, told me he's raising it. This is what I'm feeding him every day. And he had the sheep with it also, the mother and another sheep also, and one lamb. And he raised it, and they ate hay all day and like other grass that was not yet dried, right? And that's what they ate, and fruits like apples and stuff like that. And then when it was time and he was going to slaughter it, he asked me, hey, how does it have to be done in order for you to be able to eat it? And I said, well, all the blood has to be removed. So I was supposed to be up there. I couldn't be there. So when he had it killed, he called me on video, or he took a video, rather say, and sent it to me, about a 5-minute long video of how they slew this lamb and did it according to what they call the kosher way. But it's basically meaning they cut it across the neck, just like the book tells us how they did the offerings, and then peeled it back, let it drain, and I kind of feel sorry for the lamb, to tell you the truth, but we're eating this, so it's not like we're doing this for sport. And then once it was drained, then they take it and they skin it, and then they wash it, and they remove all the inwards out, and after that they cut it up for you and into the pieces and according to the cuts of meat, right? And then freeze dried it, right? And then so when he gave it to me, not freeze dried it, but what do you call it? Vacuum sealed it, right? And then so when he gave it to me, I put it on ice in the ice chest, took it home, and before we ate it, we put it. It was already frozen, so I said, man, it's frozen, so I want to make sure the rest of the blood is out. So I soaked it, right? And in soaking it, I said, well, I'm gonna put salt water, and I'm gonna change it, and I'm gonna change it, I'm gonna change it, I'm gonna change it, and it didn't take no 7 days because this lamb was drained properly upon killing it, right? So after about 2 days, changing the water like 3 times throughout the days. The meat was no longer red, right? And so after that, we boiled it, because I read in 1 Samuel when the servant of the priest said, hold on, Hophni and Phinehas, let the fat be presently burned before you take of the flesh, man. It's still raw. So I said, oh, okay, that's how they did it too. They boiled it for the remaining fat to be boiled out, right? And so I did that. I didn't read all of this yet. So I'm just doing it according to what I was knowing and going by what the book said. And after it was burned out, or it was boiled out, you could see all the fat raising to the top of the pot. You could take if anybody's ever made chicken soup, or if you've eaten lamb or meat before, rather say, and you boiled it or you made a soup with it, then when you put it in the refrigerator, you will see a layer of fat at the top. That's because the fat liquefies. What we just read, the fat that's not the ha-kabed will actually melt at a certain temperature, right? And when that happens, this is not the ha-kabed, because it takes a higher temperature, right, to melt, and it's at boiling temperature. So even if there was some ha-kabed in there, it would have melted, right? And then we removed the meat, we washed the meat, and then we tore it off of the bone and tore the meat itself apart because of the intramuscular fat, these layers of membrane, because that's what I'm gonna call it, because we've been taught that it was fat, but the Torah makes no reference to it to call it ha-kabed or peder, which is the fat the Torah references that we should not eat. So even if there is a name for it in Hebrew, and that name is fat, in English, it's not ha-kabed and it's not peder, because those were the fats that God told us that we should not eat, that should be taken off, that should be burnt on the altar. And if that's the case, when our fathers had this lamb, and they were not able to chop it up, they were not able to take the inwards out, but they had to put the entire lamb and roast it. That means to say that from what we just read, the ha-kabed would have melted inside of it, because it's going to be well over 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And also the intramuscular fat would have coated all of the muscle. The muscle would have melted and coated it, because it starts to melt at 98.6 degrees. And when you roast it over the fire, it's going to be like 400, 300 something degrees Fahrenheit. So common sense will tell us that if they was able, now they didn't go inside the animal and grabbing the fat from around the inwards, because that's not the part of the animal that God told us to eat. It said eat of its flesh, roasted with fire, not sodden in water, but roasted, because the whole animal had to be burnt, had to be roasted. And so if that's happening, and this intramuscular fat is going to melt at 98 melts, it covers the layers in the muscles, thanks to its high mono and much lower melting point, often below human body temperature. So it starts melting before 98.6 degrees, and it liquefies quickly during cooking, coating the surrounding muscle fibers to give meat its characteristic juiciness, tenderness, and rich flavor. Which means when they roast that meat over the fire and they're not able to open it for no fat to drip out, because it's a whole carcass, the fat ain't got nowhere to drip, that intramuscular fat that the book makes no reference to, and when our fathers ate of it, they couldn't break a bone of it, so they had to slice off meat from the outside of the carcass. And you cannot, it's impossible to remove fat in between muscle that is already melted. All of us on the same page? Because if that's the case, that ain't the fat that God told us not to eat, because he literally just commanded them to eat of the flesh of that lamb, and that fat in between the muscle of the lamb would have melted, and it's impossible to get it out at that point. We have to recognize that in these offerings, from what we could read in the book, we got to think a little. In these offerings, if God is commanding us to remove all of the fat, how could we place a carcass of an animal once we take out its inwards? How could we put the rest of the carcass on the altar, even if we cut the right shoulder off and we put it in pieces on the altar? If the fat is in between the muscles and the bone, or in between the skin and the muscle, or in between the muscle fibers itself, how could we remove that if we're supposed to put the whole thing on the altar after that, and it burns on the altar, and it's going to melt once they put it on the altar? How is that the fat that God's commanding us to eat? The priest would have been eating it. And how else will we cook meat? You know how? The only other way is to do it the way I did it. And you'd have to shred that meat apart. And like me and brother Yehoshua took a couple hours doing that, ripping up this meat, peeling off those little layers in between. What we thought was fat. And then we end up with a pile of shredded meat. Now, if the priest was doing that, how are they going to put that pile of shredded meat on the altar that has holes in it? Unless it would have fell through the holes and burned up in the coals itself. Somebody have to explain that to me if we're still not accepting that the intramuscular fat is not the fat that God forbid us to eat. Because they ate it.